You've probably seen some people crushing it with paid ads, and you keep on seeing their ads over and over, or maybe you've seen people share screenshots to brag about whatever their results have with paid ads, right? And when broken down, it's actually a methodology, like a certain step-by-step framework that we use to go from basically zero to actually having an ad campaign that does that kind of result. Now, obviously, this is something that takes time, effort, practice. So what I'd like to do today is actually share with you those steps of how I go from like all the way from scratch, right? It's easy to show it for like, wow, we already have something running, all the way from scratch to actually getting an ad campaign running successfully, like I said, like we've done for multiple of our business. And step number one is really something that might be seen as boring, and that is audience research. For if you can read that, probably not, but for those who are watching on YouTube, audience research, that's really the first step. And that really means diving deep into the psychology of your potential customer. Like, I would literally create a list of questions for myself. Like, for example, who is my ideal customer? What is the problem they have? What keeps them up at night? What's the dream they have? What's the worst that could happen if they wouldn't actually solve this problem, right? Because at the end of the day, your product or your service is solving a problem for a particular customer. And in many cases, for me, it also just is about going into Facebook groups where I know my audience would hang out, and I just browse through it sometimes for hours to see what are people asking, how are people replying, how are people commenting, because it allows you to get into the mind of your prospect. And it's very easy to sort of skim or forget that, or like not look at the details, but it is super, super important, even to the tiniest little detail. For example, like some types of businesses talk about how to get more leads, while other people talk about, hey, how do you get more people on your newsletter, or like how do you get opt-ins, right? And just nuances like how do certain people in certain industries call different things can make or break your campaign. You're figuring it out by really immersing yourself with your audience and really get to know who your audience is. Ideally have a conversation with multiple of your customers, like immerse yourself so that all you can think about is how they think, right? Because that's going to help you do everything that comes hereafter. And that brings me to step number two, which is really your offer and positioning. Just to be clear, your offer is not your product, right? Your offer could be your product. It's probably your product is a big part of your offer, but your offer consists of everything, right? That consists of like maybe you have extra things that they can get. That consists of the details, like for example, hey, whether there's free shipping or not. And something that I mentioned earlier on the show is how do you position yourself not as an improvement offer, but as a new opportunity, right? So you want to figure out a way how you're going to present whatever new opportunity you bring to the world, because again, that whole big idea, as Todd Brown calls it, that big idea is going to have a major impact on the whole overall success of your campaign, right? All the way from your ads. If there's a big idea that is compelling, people are going to be more inclined to click on it, continue, opt in, etc., whatever steps you have on the funnel. So this is where I spend a lot of my time on offering and positioning. And then really I go as fast as possible to a MVP. And that is, like some people, and I've done this myself as well, go all the way in to create a funnel and a product and everything around it, and they'll take months and months and months and months and months to actually get live, only to realize that they've actually been climbing this ladder that stands against the wall, and after 3-4 months they end up at the very top and they realize they put the ladder on the wrong wall, right? And the same thing applies here. Like, I've seen so many people do this. I've done this myself, where I spent but months of work to realize the whole positioning was off. The whole, like what I thought was the right offer was not the right offer. People were simply not interested. People were not buying. It just didn't work. So you can basically do an educated guess of what funnel mechanism is going to work, like what type of funnel would work. And I didn't launch that as soon as possible, right? And when I launch it, I often have the majority not ready, right? Because if you were to look at it, like if this would be the funnel, let's say for example, a VSL funnel. Maybe you have an opt-in page here, right? And then like a VSL here, and then maybe below the VSL, a long form sales page, and then obviously like a follow-up sequence email. Like if I first launch it, I would have the opt-in page ready, I would have the VSL ready, right? And that's it, probably. Like the rest of the page probably isn't written yet. All the email follow-ups probably isn't written yet, because I'll add that on the fly. But if I want to make sure everything is fully done, then it's going to take me, it's going to take a long time before I actually get some data in. And I want to make sure to verify my data as soon as possible. And a quick hack, not a hack, but something that I like to do as a quick way to basically test your MVP and to test out your positioning is if you already have an audience. What I've done many times actually is I launched a test webinar. What I've done in the past, like I literally just invited, for example, 1/2 or 1/3 of my email list into a webinar. Not all, randomly gonna select 1/3, I'm gonna invite them to a webinar, and I'm gonna pitch whatever product I have on that offer, on that positioning. I'm gonna do a webinar and try to, convince them to actually sign up. And then I would know exactly from that webinar, 5% of people, for example, has purchased. Cool. Next week, I'm gonna do the next webinar. Same webinar, but like with a slightly different positioning. I'm gonna improve things because now in the first webinar, I've heard people asking like, but does it also include this? Does it what about this problem? I've heard all their objections, so I can improve the actual presentation, right? And I'm gonna do it again to the next 1/3, right? And then the week after, I'll do it again. So in 3 weeks, I've done 3 webinars, all equally to 1/3 of my existing list. And because of that, I know exactly which positioning is apparently more tempting, or which one is converting best. And I've done this multiple times. And then from there, I knew all right, this is the positioning that apparently, based on the data I so far have, is working best. And that's what I'm gonna roll with. That's what I'm gonna go for. So I launched my MVP funnel as soon as possible. And then it's all about testing, and ideally testing one thing at a time. And there's so many things you can test out when you're starting your funnel, because if you think about it, you'll have to record multiple ads or create multiple ads, right? So which ad is gonna work? Which targeting is gonna work best? There's so many variables. Because of that, I try to focus on just initially on the highest priorities first, like the things that will have the biggest impact on whether my campaign is going to work, right? So the very first thing I really want to nail is positioning, right? Again, I do that ideally with a webinar or something where I can get feedback from my audience, right? And then I look at the whole funnel. What is probably the biggest bottleneck? And that's also why I look at the way I want to launch an MVP funnel, very raw, very rough. But I want to have something up so I can actually see and look at the data. Because for example, maybe this opt-in form on my initial rough raw test converts at 5%. If that's the case, I know at 5%, I'm not going to make that profitable. It needs to convert better, a lot better than that. So I know that's going to be my first priority. How do you figure out the overall idea to get people to actually opt in, right? If that on my initial test would already be 30%, then all right, that's pretty cool. Apparently my ads and my opt-in page, they work, right? So at least, so that's not the biggest issue, right? So I'm always looking at what's the next biggest thing I can tweak that would have the highest likelihood of actually improving the overall funnel. And that usually starts at what's the weakest chain in the link. And that really brings me to point number 5, which is scaling. And along with scaling, probably it is killing, right? And that obviously is already part also in number 4, the testing phase. And what I mean with that is not every funnel is going to be a success. I wish, right? If, for example, you would only get 20 cents back, if $1 you spend, you get 20 cents back, that's really hard to make work, right? At that point, I would kill that funnel. I would say, right, we went through all those steps, but apparently this funnel isn't going to work, right? And sure, you can argue that, hey, but you can still improve from there, right? But again, if $1 you spend, you get 20 cents back, and you want to make that profitable. Let's say you want to get it to the point where it's $1 would get you $2 back, right? Because we're trying to make a profit here as we're growing our business. It means you have to improve it 10 times. And improving something 10 times is not easy, right? So most likely your whole mechanism, either your positioning is off or your funnel mechanism is off. And that's why you need to go back to the drawing board and kill that project. Actually, one of the funnels that I've successfully scaled is actually a funny story. I started with that. What I've done is I launched a funnel similar as what Jeff Walker did on the product launch formula. So a 3-step video sequence. So people opt in first, they immediately get a video where I try to engage them on the thing that we're going to sell. Next day they would get video number 2, awesome, more engaging content, and then next day they would get video number 3, and at that point they could make a purchase, right? They could actually invest in a program. And what we found is that the majority of people, by day 3, they were not engaged anymore. Like we didn't do a good job engaging those cold leads, because those were people who never heard of us before. So that funnel didn't work at all. We killed it. And that's when we tried out the third mechanism, right? Went back to the drawing board, started over from scratch. We did a webinar funnel. And that's where things took off. And all of a sudden, we saw something that works. I think initially we were around break even, but from there we started optimizing and tweaking, and we've done millions in sales in that one particular funnel. And that's really the process that we go through. Audience research, you figure out your offer and positioning. This is probably the hardest part and the most important part. And then as soon as possible, you launch your MVP funnel. Don't spend months waiting around, because the data will tell you whether you should kill or scale it, right? And you test one thing at a time. Don't do everything at the same time, even though it's tempting, and even though there's so much to do, you have to start out with your best guesses somewhere. And if you don't have your best guesses, then surround yourself with people who've already done this. Try to get their advice, try to see what others are doing, so that you can at least formulate some kind of an educated guess of what might work best. And then you either scale or kill it, right? And then you start over, or you keep on scaling your funnel. And even if you scale it, you continuously keep on testing as well, because over time your funnel will, it might decrease because people have seen it multiple times. So you continuously want to use the data that you get, all the traffic that you get, to continuously run split tests and continuously improve your funnel, so that always you're on top of the game. Because if you can continually improve conversions, then you'll be able to scale your campaign for a much longer period, which obviously means more profit to you. So hopefully that's been helpful. That's my 5-step process that I've used multiple times to create multi-million-dollar ad campaigns for my business. I hope it's helpful. If it is, please subscribe. Make sure to subscribe, and I'd always love a review as well. So with that having said, I hope you have an amazing day, and I'll talk to y'all soon.